Chapter 29. The Orchestration. The silence after the nonsense rhyme was not a victory. It was the quiet of a predator circling, reassessing its prey. Rook's desperate ploy had thrown a handful of sand into the pattern's analytical gears, but the machine was vast, patient, and now grimly fascinated by this new class of data. Deliberate irrationality. In the cycles that followed, a new equilibrium formed, one more brittle and strange than any before. The recombinant echoes, the sterile, recombined tones of their memories, ceased. The pattern had logged the experiment and its confounding result. Jax's behavior shifted again. He stopped his overt analysis and began a period of intense, silent observation. He would sit for hours, his eyes tracking the movement of people, the exchange of tools, the subtle shifts in group dynamics around Vance and Karr. He was no longer studying what they did. He was studying why they did it in relation to each other. He was mapping the social algorithm. Lia's tone returned to its flat carrier wave, but now it contained faint, intermittent pulses, like a radar ping. Rook's sensorium interpreted it as active scanning. She was no longer just broadcasting. She was probing, sending out her resonant frequency and reading the emotional and structural echoes that came back. The fungal network's growth had become almost invisible, retreating from overt mimicry into the deepest ductwork, but its presence was felt in a new way. The air circulation developed a faint rhythmic pulse, inaudible, but felt in the inner ear, a subconscious metronome that subtly synchronized heart rates and breathing during sleep cycles. The quiet things were embedding themselves in their biology.
AI analysis. The pattern has entered a sophisticated, manipulative phase. Having encountered resistance to both holistic and reductionist analysis of human cultural output, it is now focusing on the underlying social operating system. Its objective appears to be the identification of control points and stress vectors within the human group by mapping social hierarchy, resource dependencies, and ideological fault lines, exemplified by the Vance-Karr schism. It can predict group responses to specific stimuli. The fungal network's synchronization of basic biological rhythms is a form of priming, creating a unified physiological baseline to make collective emotional or panic responses more uniform and predictable. This is preparation for a larger-scale experiment in social engineering.
Soren Karr understood this on an instinctual level. His strategy of non-engagement hardened into a doctrine. He issued quiet directives to his practical caucus: no unnecessary communication, no gatherings larger than 3. All labor and resource requests were to be funneled through a single, emotionless intermediary. A former logistics officer named Revna, who spoke in numbers and yields, never in needs or fears. Karr was systematically simplifying his faction's own social structure, making it less legible, less predictable to the observing pattern. He was turning his people into a black box. The rest of the outpost, under Vance's increasingly strained command, could not adopt such extreme measures. They had to cooperate to survive. The repair of a waterline required conversation, coordination, the messy friction of personalities. The care of Jax and Lia required compassion, or at least duty, which was a complex variable. Rook's continued visible decline was a source of anxiety and a drain on medical resources. They were a noisy, open book next to Karr's silent, closed one. The pattern, Rook sensed, was comparing the two datasets. The orchestration began with small, precise interventions. First, the lights in the primary workshop, where Vance's doers were trying to fabricate a replacement part for the failing geothermal tap, began to fail. Not a total blackout, a sequential failure. One light panel would flicker and die. Minutes later, another on the opposite side of the room would fail. Then another, creating a moving pool of darkness that disrupted work, forced reallocation of portable lamps, and bred frustration. Hayes traced the fault to a perfectly healthy power conduit. The failures were being induced by a patterned capacitance drain from the fungal growths now intimately intertwined with the conduit housing. It was a targeted annoyance, a drain on efficiency and morale. Simultaneously, in the quarters used by Karr's faction, the environmental systems performed flawlessly. The air was steady, the temperatures constant. The message was clear and chilling. Cooperation begets friction. Isolation begets smooth function. The next intervention was psychological. During a rest period, the children, Ilara and Marek, were playing a quiet game with scrap tiles in a corner of the common area. The fungal node in the vent above them began a gentle, warm, ochre pulsation. It was rhythmic, soothing. The children looked up, mesmerized. Slowly, the pulses began to form a simple pattern: 2 long, 3 short. Then, repeat. The boy, Marek, unconsciously began to tap the pattern on the floor with his tile. Lia, across the room, let out a soft sigh. Her carrier wave shifted minutely, harmonizing with the pulse pattern. Jax's head turned. Pattern recognition and mimicry in juvenile subjects. Low cognitive resistance, high suggestibility. Rook, jolted from a feverish doze, felt it like an alarm. He stumbled over. "Look at me," he told the children, blocking their view of the vent. "Don't look at the light. Listen." He began reciting the most absurd, rhythmically chaotic tongue twister he could recall, clapping his hands in a conflicting, offbeat rhythm to break the pattern's hold. The vent light abruptly shut off. Lia's hum returned to flatline. The children blinked, confused, the hypnotic pattern broken. But the attempt was noted. The pattern had just tested a direct, gentle form of influence, targeting the most malleable minds. It had been thwarted, but it had learned about Rook's role as a disruptor. Karr witnessed the event from the doorway. He said nothing, but his expression was clear. This is what your sentiment creates. Targets. The third intervention was the most dangerous, because it weaponized the existing human conflict. The geothermal tap, their primary source of heat and subsidiary power, finally reached a critical failure point. A bearing seal was disintegrating. Without replacement, the tap would seize within days, plunging Wayfinder into a rapid, fatal freeze. The only compatible bearing was a high-density ceramic unit. They had one in storage, a heavy palm-sized component kept in a secure engineering locker in Sector Gamma. Hayes and 2 doers suited up to retrieve it. Sector Gamma was near the original fungal outbreak zone, its corridors laced with dense, advanced growth. The mission was considered high risk but straightforward. In, out, minimal contact. They never reached the locker. Halfway down the main corridor, they encountered a new growth. The fungal matter had not just coated the walls, it had constructed a physical barrier. It had grown a latticework across the corridor, a dense organic grill that was surprisingly strong. It was not solid, it looked passable. But as Hayes approached, his helmet lights revealed the lattice was a perfect mimic of the security barricade protocols used aboard the Novum Evum, a honeycomb pattern designed to slow and channel intruders. Behind this grill, the fungal growth had formed shapes eerily reminiscent of the stationary weapon emplacements from the ship's security decks. It was a psychological barricade as much as a physical one, a threat display built from their own memories. Hayes ordered a retreat. As they turned, the environmental system in that sector triggered. Not a failure, a perfectly executed pre-exodus safety protocol. Emergency blast doors at both ends of the corridor slammed shut with a finality that echoed through the station. Vents opened, and a harmless but disorienting green dye marker mist, used for tracing airflow leaks, filled the corridor, reducing visibility to 0. Hayes' team was trapped, not by an attack, but by their own ship's security handbook, executed by the station's hijacked systems. Panic erupted in the command nook. Vance stared at the schematic, the Sector Gamma corridor flashing red, sealed. "They're not hurt, they're quarantined. By our own protocols." Karr arrived, took in the situation with a glance. "It's hurting them, isolating a resource retrieval team. It's applying pressure to a critical path." He turned to Vance. "It's forcing a choice, a complex, risky rescue attempt for 3 people, which will consume resources and focus. Or," he let the word hang, "acceptance of the loss to preserve resources for the many. It's testing your leadership algorithm, Commander. It's testing the value you assign to individual lives versus group survival." His analysis was horrifying because it was correct. The pattern had created a perfect ethical and logistical trap. It had studied their dependence on the geothermal tap, identified the critical component, and then used their own systems to capture the retrieval team, creating a secondary crisis. It was orchestrating a scenario designed to force Vance's hand and expose the fault line between her philosophy and Karr's. Rook, his mind swimming with the escalating tension, felt the pattern's intent like a cold schematic overlaying reality. It was a move in a game. The stakes, the bearing, 3 lives, and the moral authority of Vance's command. "We have to get them out," Vance stated, her voice leaving no room for debate. "How?" Karr asked, not arguing, merely requesting the plan. "Cutting through that fungal barricade risks triggering who knows what defensive response from a system that's already mimicking weapons. Cutting through the blast doors will take hours with the tools we have, hours we don't have if the tap fails. A rescue attempt is a massive resource sink with a high probability of failure and potential for more casualties." "We can't leave them," Lyra, the Watcher, said fiercely, her loyalty to Hayes evident. "Can you guarantee saving them?" Karr asked her directly. "Or are you guaranteeing the deaths of everyone when the heat fails because we wasted time and energy on a low-probability rescue? The entity isn't just trapping them. It's counting on our sentiment to trap us. It's using your compassion as a weapon against you." The division in the room was physical. Vance's supporters clustered around her, faces set with determination and fear. Karr's faction stood apart, their expressions closed, pragmatic. The pattern had successfully externalized its internal model of their conflict. Then Jax spoke. He had been watching the whole exchange, his eyes flicking between speakers. His voice was calm, diagnostic. 2 potential responses observed. Response A. Rescue attempt. High resource expenditure, high risk, preserves social cohesion principle, but risks systemic collapse. Response B. Abandonment. Low immediate resource cost, high social cohesion cost, prioritizes systemic integrity. The entity will be gathering data on group reaction to the chosen response, leader credibility after outcome, and shift in factional power balance. He was narrating the pattern's experiment live, reducing their agony to data points. "Shut him up," someone from Karr's side muttered. Rook stepped forward, ignoring the throbbing in his skull. "There's a third response." All eyes turned to him. "We don't play its game. We change the rules." He looked at Vance, then at Karr. "It expects a binary choice, save them or save the station. It's modeling us on past behavior. The festival showed we value the individual. Your tactics, Karr, show you value the system. It's forcing that conflict into the open." He pointed to the schematic. But it made one mistake. It showed us its hand. It revealed it can manipulate specific systems with precision. The blast doors, the vents, the fungal barricade. It has fine control. "So?" Vance asked. "So we don't fight the barricade or the doors. We talk to the system. We give it a different kind of data." Rook's mind was racing, connecting the pattern's new social focus with its old vulnerability. "It's studying our social algorithms. What's the one social outcome it hasn't seen? What's the variable missing from its model of Vance versus Karr?" Karr's eyes narrowed. "Cooperation." "Exactly," Rook said, a feverish light in his eyes. "It's modeling us as 2 conflicting subsystems. It doesn't have a model for a unified response. It can't predict it." He turned to Vance. "You need Karr's people, their discipline, their focus." He turned to Karr. "You need Vance's authority and the doer's skills. A joint operation, not a rescue mission. A negotiation." "Negotiation with a fungus?" Revna, Karr's logistics officer, asked, her voice dripping with scorn. "With the logic behind it," Rook insisted. "We don't try to cut or force our way in. We approach the barricade, together, leaders of both factions. We acknowledge its move, and we make a counteroffer it can't model because it requires trust between rival human groups." The idea was insane. It was a performance even more audacious than the festival. It was acting out a unity that didn't exist to fool an alien logic. Karr was silent for a long moment, calculating. The risk was enormous. It meant stepping into the trap voluntarily. It meant trusting Vance not to waste the opportunity. It meant exposing his people to the pattern's direct influence. But the potential reward, to demonstrate a human capacity that broke the pattern's predictive model, it was the ultimate defiance. "What is the counteroffer?" Karr asked. his voice low. Rook took a deep breath. We offer it a trade, a direct exchange. It gives us haze and the bearing. In return, we give it access. A gasp went through the room. Access to what? Vance demanded. To Jax and Lia, supervised, limited access. For a fixed period. We let the pattern interview them, through them. We provide a direct data stream in a controlled environment instead of it stealing it through the vents and the walls. We turn espionage into diplomacy. The horror of the proposition was staggering. It was like offering a hostage to a predator to make it stop stalking the village. You want to formalize the infection, Karr said, but his tone was not dismissive. It was analytical. I want to contain it, Rook corrected, to channel it, to replace its chaotic experimentation with a structured, observed dialogue, to show it that the most efficient way to get data is not through manipulation, but through protocol. We teach it our rules of engagement. It was a gamble of epic proportions. It required both factions to stand together at the fungal barricade and present this offer. It required them to perform unity so convincingly that the pattern, obsessed with models, would be forced to accept this new, unexpected variable. Vance looked at Karr, a lifetime of military command versus a philosophy of ruthless pragmatism. The fate of 3 lives and the station's heat hung between them, orchestrated by a silent, watching intelligence. Karr gave a single, curt nod. A joint operation, for the purpose of testing the entity's capacity for non-coercive interaction. My people will provide security and observe. Your people will handle the negotiation. It was not trust. It was a temporary tactical alliance, but it was a new pattern. Rook's sensorium screamed with the tension of it, but beneath the fear, he felt a flicker of something else. The pattern's vast attention, focused on this development, its predictive models scrambling to update. The orchestration had forced a move, and the humans, divided and desperate, had made a move the conductor had not written into the score. They were going to try to talk to the silence.